Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for coming along to our session. Sorry. I'm more nervous about being a chair than I am presenting the paper. First presentation is by Jonathan and myself. Our paper is called Encountering Peats. No, I'm going to put the mic down. Right. Here we go.
So yeah, the title's Encountering Peats. Just a brief context for this. Ken and I have known each other and been writing together for over 20 years. We've been droning on for about 20 years. In our conversations from almost the first time we met, which was in Bristol, as you'll hear, Ken was talking about Pete. It's going so smoothly, this. Yeah, Ken was talking about Pete. And I came to realize over the years that when Ken talked about Pete, there was one of about 4 Petes that he could be talking about. So this is about Pete and Pete's, the encounter with Pete that we've had in the 20 years of writing with each other. We introduce you to Pete. This is Pete. Meet Pete. Jonathan first encountered Pete somewhere here in Bristol. He imagines this first encounter having been in a pub on Park Street, late one evening at the end of one of their doctoral program days, him and Ken. Ken in full flow. Ken is flow, Jonathan now realizes, but back then he'd known him only a matter of weeks and knew him only as Ken. And Pete would no doubt have been present a year or so later on their first trip to the International Congress of Qualitative Inquiry in Illinois, on the flight, and again as the two of them eagerly traipsed between sessions in Urbana-Champaign. Pete would have been there. And he would have been on the line at other times that year and since, over the phone, Ken in Cornwall, Jonathan at that time in Oxford, and then since in Edinburgh. Many other moments, many other places. Pete was and is there at all of these. Meet Pete. This is Pete.
In our always emergent writings over many years, these encountering Petes seem to have no tangible starting or ending points. In this, then, Pete sometimes acts as Bart's punctum, the breakthrough point, where our wandering, sometimes overlapping lines of reading, writing, and thinking in the act seem to execute the point where our adventurings of ideas act as the becomings of new intersections and creativities. Perhaps it is here that ineffably, in the persisting eventing of these encounters, in the behind the back of inattention, in the vibrancy that new unthought brought to life, the mediating forcefulness of imminent tangibilities allows prehensivities to be the more than of noticing, where a representation of constraints and the inaccuracies of apprehension and delusions of cognitive capture are destabilized and, in encounters in emergent refrain, occurrences repeat.
There is always more than one Pete. The proper name, right, Deleuze and Parnay, does not designate a subject, but something which happens. Pete is not singular, not a singular act. There is always repetition. See what we did there? Always difference, always difference.
Perhaps here, where there are crossings of lines whose intersections energize the noticings of our collaborative writings, parastrata of resistance begins to emerge. Here also is a palpable touchstone with Manning's writing with the pragmatics of the useless. Here, there is a stumbling across an experiential encounter with Pete that animates the sharedness of writing this paper. Firstly, the paradoxical force of Manning's pragmatics of the useless forcefully creates the need for attunement in and to the sensing of the constant processualism of eventing and the always more than of experience. Secondly, Whitehead argues that in order to come to terms with the infinity of encounters in experience, there must always be attempts to establish experiential relations with what he refers to as actual occasions. He writes that nothing can be omitted, All kinds of experience have to be experienced. Drunk and sober, sleeping and waking, intellectual and physical, religious and skeptical, anxious and carefree, anticipatory and retrospective, happy and grieving, in the lights and in the dark, and so on. He urgently stresses the need not to avoid complexity, to always be alert and not to ignore any detail, to ensure that every method and approach taken, any action carried out, cannot be described as an act of happy simplification.
Pete appears. Pete continues to appear. Pete has always been here, they now realise. In simply human, normative terms, Pete is Ken's friends. Pete and Ken meet in a Cornwall pub, sometimes on their own, sometimes with others, most of whom are also called Pete. Pete and Ken have just come off the phone. Pete is the friend who's just become a surprise father in late middle age. Pete is the partner of one of Ken's exes. Pete is the friend that Ken travelled with on a road trip in the United States in 1989. No, that was Steve, a rare Steve. How did Jonathan get that wrong?
The affirmative critique that Whitehead's account writing offers also argues that all experience is persistently processual. In duration, experience persists, and in this persistence there is the ever-presencing forcefulness of the always more than. And in this there is also the presencing created by Manning's rhetoric when she inquires into what things do when they shape each other. Becoming alive with every actual occasion necessitates awarenesses of the constant elision of moments and movements. Every Pete-induced actual occasion temptingly prompts vibrant and new knowings that have the potential to shape future experiences. And every occurrence of Pete also offers an arguing for attentiveness to such actions and behaviours as a means of bringing to life their potential capaciousness. In this, there is always encouragement of the speculative necessity to adventure with ideas and to engage in what Deleuze and Guattari refer to as the free and wild creation of concepts.
There are perhaps 4 Petes in Ken's life. Jonathan has never met them, but he has encountered them. They are constantly presencing. Sorry.
Pete recently lent Ken a copy of Roger Deacon's book, Notes from Walnut Tree Farm. Pete's loan emerged from the knowing that Deacon shared with Ken a love of swimming in the sea, and that Deacon's writing was also energized by his love and extensive knowledge of the natural world in which he assiduously and frequently swam. Deacon noted, quote, "If you shake the branch of an ancient oak above an outspread cotton tablecloth in summer, you'll be amazed by the beauty and diversity of the small beings that tumble from amongst the leaves. The relations between these beings and their host tree is generally ancient and intimate, yet when we walk in a wood or along a hedgerow, it is the oak tree that we see, not the sum total of its many tenants."
Pete is concept. Peting, perhaps, is force, a flow that animates what happens in our collaborative writing and beyond, and has always done so. Pete as more than human engagement, as provocation, as presencing. We were and are never only two. Pete has always taken us out of ourselves into the what else. Only now, after all this time, do we turn to how writing is always already Petesing.
So, in walking through the forest of experience that Deacon refers to, how is it for us? When looking up, is it only the oak tree that we see? It is necessary for us to offer a more astutely suggested view of the complex world around us by avoiding such happy simplifications of method and by exercising engagements with the world in more detailed, sharply focused and action-oriented ways. Perhaps by not simply observing it casually from a distance, and instead by becoming more forcefully with the world, avoiding anodyne representations of the world, and in so doing, nurturing provocations, spiritings, and betweenings that are alert to those complex relationalities and those experiential existences that pulse and seethe within it. Thank you. Yes, our next presenter is, here we are. Yes, Alexandra Pitt. Hi, Alexandra.
Hello, everyone. So yes, at the start of my PhD journey, looking at, I guess, the interpersonal and transpersonal challenges of cumulative grief. So I have a spoken word piece for you this morning, and thank you to David for his ongoing encouragement and patience. Okay. I feel them all around me, all the time, like ghosts, in a very real way, my brother told me. It conjured that moment almost 15 years ago, when we left our mother's house for the last time after it was sold. It wasn't where we grew up. That house was where our mother settled into widowhood after the death of our father. It was where, some years later, in the small hours of the morning, our mother, with 2 uniformed police officers, awaited our arrival on the night the car accident took our brother's life. The hallway is from where I watched my chemo-ravaged sister have to crawl up the stairs. The landing is where my mother's ashes sat, on a laundry basket, hugged by a teddy monkey that my nephew had given me one Christmas. The living room is where I received the call he had hanged himself, and my nephew was also gone. We were not leaving a family home, but rather a mausoleum, and its horror was palpable. The reality of what happened to our family presented itself in a horrifying swarm of spirits. It's as if they're all around us, crowding in, my brother said. I felt them too. The ghosts of our decimated family, overwhelming in number, and protesting that he and I would not visit again. It was a collective scream for attention, emanating from every wall and doorway and every inch of air. We took refuge in each other, reduced to the young children we once were, under attack from our once protectors who were now themselves demanding protection. They were pulling us back, their bond to us urgently at risk with every passing second. They were making themselves felt, protesting, begging that we the living not just walk blithely out of the door and leave they the dead to their abandonment. I am an atheist, and I do not believe in ghosts. And yet I felt viscerally the energies of the dead swarming around me that day. The same way you see tornadoes of ghosts depicted in movies like in The Haunting or Carnival of Souls. Scenes that might seem fantastical to some no longer felt that outlandish to me, but rather fair representation of my lived sensation. I need not believe in spirits to believe in the bodily sensation of haunting. My dead feel rather like a garden I'm warranted to tend, each of them their own flower bed set to become overrun with weeds without attention. I'm reminded of Haruki Murakami's novel, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World, where a man's shadow lives separated in its own garden, with consequences for both for shadow neglect. And so, for my own health, I tend to the garden where my shadow resides. I use the same bread knife my mother used, and each time I do, I feel my shadow tending the flower bed in my garden mausoleum. Friends have expressed something similar. One friend says she feels close to her mother each time she flips an egg with her inherited spatula. Another wears her mother's cardigan and says it's like she's hugging me. There is something about the daily caregiving of motherhood that supports physical bonds with lost mothers through everyday objects. I cannot reach my other lost family so well. I have drawings from my father, but I rarely hold those in daily life. Those same friends express the same of their fathers. They inherited craft works or professional objects, like drawings and dog tags. But these are artifacts, and they sit on a shelf or on the wall or in a cupboard. They are not items frequently held or interacted with, and they do not cultivate the flower beds the same way. I wish I'd kept my father's glasses case. It was just one of those cheap cases where you could open one end by squeezing 2 corners. He would fidget with it through whatever mystery thoughts he usually kept himself. I can, of course, run my finger over the handwritten mathematical equations he left behind, but it is not like using my mother's bread knife and is not like feeling her natural presence in my own ordinary physical routines, which is what I've realized I need to tend the flower beds. I recently received a small amount of money, 30 years after my brother's death, and in the year he would have turned 65, from what would have been a pension we had no idea existed until a few weeks ago. My brother was a technical author and keen creative writer. We have that in common, though he did not live long enough to learn that about me. I received enough money to buy a good quality typewriter, to be somewhat unexpectedly one final gift from my long-lost brother. It is something I will use regularly, just as I do my mother's bread knife. That will be 2 flower beds physically integrated into my own daily life that I can tend simply by being myself and going about my day. I am slow to get to all of the flower beds, but the intention is there, so my shadow is not protesting too loudly right now. The ghosts are at ease with the weeds currently growing, as it will not be forever. They know they have not been completely abandoned and are happy to wait their turn. I will find a way.
Thank you, Alexandra. That was fantastic. Okay, our next presenter is Simone. Simone and her Simone's presentation is called Telling a Story, Creating Connections, Playing a Piece of Music.
For half of my life, I have had to be very aware of my personal connections. Growing up in an East German family and non-academic one, I left home to study sociology at Leipzig University. The small department of 3 professors and about 20 students every other year had a strong philosophical and historical grounded approach to social theory. I proudly graduated with my doctorate in 1987. Reunification, our reconnection to the rest of Germany, came soon afterwards in 1990. Connections don't usually come out of the blue. That one really did. All of us look out for connections. We initiate them, we nurture them into existence. Some we don't enjoy, some we resist or hide from. Few can be ignored. I offer you my connections to one story, to pictures, and probably a small piece of music. Picture me arriving back in Leipzig 15 years after my graduation. The university was hosting the National Congress of Sociology. It felt good to reconnect with my alma mater, and I prepared to present a paper in a lecture theater I remembered from my students' days. In the cloakroom, I saw a volunteer with a badge with the surname of one of my former sociology tutors. It turned out she was indeed from the same family. She was her daughter. Surprisingly, she couldn't connect her mother or I to the Department of Sociology. It was as if she had no idea about the subject and its connections to the bird. In that moment, I was disheartened and felt rootless disconnected. I vividly remember my car mechanic father as a great communicator, not as a man who chatted a lot, but he was a doer. His ability to notice and to understand how people connected made all the difference in a socialist economy. He was a talented car tuner and loved car racing. He used his skills for his family by making connections to maneuver around the chronic consumer supply issues. My mother had all the wide skill set. She was a mother and worked full-time in a photographic research lab, similar to Kodak. She helped develop the gelatin surface of photographic film. She never and the university herself, but provided me with the first contact to Leipzig University. One of her colleagues had a child there who took me to a sociology lecture. Under-the-table deal-making practices in socialist societies were discredited. But from my point of view, living through that time, they were fundamental for our ability to work, to love, to belong, to stay in tune with our human and more than human world. I wonder if I inherited from my parents a special capability to create connections. My transition to post-university life began in 2022. From Fulda University, I contacted and then traveled on my first sabbatical abroad to see Mary Kane, Jonathan Wyatt, Kathy McGinn-Halferty, and Katrina Douglas. From my base in Newcastle, I went to see Mary from the Elphinstone Institute in Aberdeen, Jonathan in Edinburgh, and then connected to the wider orthoethnographic community at the conference in Bristol. It was my second orthoethnographic experience after Urbana-Champaign in 2009, and I had to learn the expectations thinking on my feet. I didn't feel I did well, but on the second day, I began to make connections. Katrina asked me to talk to a young artist, and conversation was filled. I agreed, and I remember that as a pleasant connection between three people. In 2024, I returned to Bristol without a paper, but with more confidence, and I was able to absorb that friendly and inspiring atmosphere. Back at Fulda University, I continued with my orthoethnographic research. I collaborated on a small project with my PhD student Eric and a larger one with Nadine, a new colleague in our department. During my second sabbatical in Great Britain, Katrina hosted me at West London University, and I met my old friends in Scotland again. When Mary said on phone, "Your room's waiting," it felt a bit like coming home. At the next Bristol conference last year, things moved up a notch. My PhD student Eric presented a poem at his first conference abroad. I presented a paper too. The morning after that, another big connection emerged. I had a 2-hour conversation with Janani that progressed into a deep dive into health sciences and pharmacy. Katrina and David invited Janani and I to Cornwall. We connected for 2 days and hatched a plan to work together. Back in Fulda, I convinced the board of our Shaping Future Society's research network to invite those Brazilian English colleagues to our international conference. This took place earlier this year. Ongoing connections with those colleagues have changed as our lives have moved on, because that's what happens. They weave in and out of our lives, and there will also be disconnections as we create new ones. I've been known to wonder if I really did inherit that special capability from my parents. My colleague and friend Janani had no such doubts, and she pointed the images and I had created. Yes, you can. On the right, you can see my birthday card from my Fulda project team. On the left, you see a collage of wool and paper. A few of them are in the room. We created that together on a hot day while listening to the New Zealander Esther Fitzpatrick. She talked about how to converse with our rivers as ancestors in Devon. I was delighted to see all those connections reflected back to me. For the last 2 years away from university life, I have had the support of my flute. It connects me to another world, a world of sound and emotion. Practicing and touching the instrument that was made by craftsmen from silver, forged from our planet 1,000 years ago, creates positive connections too. Sometimes connections stretch us too far. Thank you so much for listening, with a special mention to Mary, who from Aberdeen not only has welcomed me, but also offered me some more nuanced English ways of expressing myself. If you give me the possibility to take a deep breath, and if I don't clash my feet, then I'm try to give you a short one. Stop there. Thank you.
Well done, Simone. Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, so we're now to our last presenter, Rubina Khatun. It's Rubina. Okay.
My name is Rubina Khatun. I'm a trainee clinical psychologist at the University of Hertfordshire. I'm currently writing my thesis exam of decoloniality in clinical psychology. And my hope today is I'll pique your interest and you might want to get involved in my research. So in short, my short and sweet title Darn has now become tracing the postures, patterns and practices that support health and healing within communities. You try saying that. So this presentation, like my thesis, has taken unexpected twists and turns. So a condition of my ethics is that I'm unable to speak about certain experiences and events, and this is not without its challenges. I work with people who've experienced trauma, and in my thesis, I'm interested in intersectionality of colonialism, which reveal how historical and ongoing systems of oppression, so for example, race, gender, class, they're not isolated issues. Instead, they're deeply connected structures built to reinforce the global matrix of power. As a British Bengali Muslim, my story is sadly intertwined with Islamophobia, sexism, and racism, and much more. So unsurprisingly, I've become very interested in the question, how does one research the hard-to-research topics? So darning and poetry are creative inquiries I've put into the fabric of my research as they're wonderful ways of storytelling. Have the next one, thank you. So I have two poems about yoga to share with you. I chose yoga as a way to speak about coloniality, decoloniality, because I think it's accessible. Many of us have a relationship to it, whether it's close or a distant relation. And it's also often recommended as healing or self-care. So while you listen to each poem, people in the audience, I invite you to stitch the silk cloth that is going around or will go around. Each has a cut or a tear in it, and the invitation is to heal down the wounds using collective hands, your hands. It's okay to pass it on if you don't feel familiar with it, it's fine. But basically, darning involves creating first vertical stitches up and down, and then next you interweave them horizontally. Don't worry if you don't get that far. Within the poems, I speak about bodies, movement, and linking it to colonialism. But please take care of yourself while listening. Do whatever's necessary, so turn your cameras off if you're online, leave the room, distract yourself. I provide contact details as well if you want to speak to me after.
I wouldn't know, come find it.
Oh, so just next.
So just play it.
5 seconds on. That's it.
Part 1. Come to stand in Tadasana, mountain pose. Rise upwards to the heavens and feel your feet firmly on the mat, drawing energy from this foundation. Moving now to Uttanasana, legs straighten, fingers find toes. Let your head hang heavy. Feel Earth's life source flowing down from river to sea, nourishing land in the process. Inhale to extend your chest, to lengthen your spine and bring your gaze forward. Observe the rows of elasticated tie-dyed uniforms, each reflecting the other. Or are they clones of themselves? Sea anemones grouped together to form massive clonal colonies, wee bodies who then shift towards the ground to downward facing dog. In a beautiful wave-like motion, we melt our hearts into the earth and release the tension from the day. This physical action of Uttanasana, moving into Adho Mukha Svanasana, reminiscent of a bed of clams, opening, breathing, feeding. Exhale and return to the teacher. We are one. with nature, grounded, yoked. To this ancient practice of spirit intertwined with the universe, preparing our body for deep meditation, so that individual consciousness may unite with everything consciousness. We, bodies that bend.
You. So before starting my psychology doctoral kind of training, I read some really dense books or textbooks around yoga. I'm not professing that I know everything about it. But as I said, I'm Muslim, but this Hindu spirituality and yoga, I saw similarities in my faith with Hinduism. So for me, this urged me to connect with stewardship. And now I run a market garden by community. But in other ways, when I read this poem to my sister, she initially thought that I'd written about Salah, which is Muslim prayer, and it consists of 5 foundational postures. So my second poem, not quite yet, speaks about cacao ceremony in yoga, and I mean into Shavasana, which is a pose of yoga. And my second poem contains figures of death. So again, do you feel whatever's necessary to protect yourself?
Bodies that Bend, Part 2. We bodies that bend have arrived and are fluent in the divine in me honours the divine in you. Namaste, we say, filling our bellies, and later ask questions we offer up to the sky. Are we grounding or departing, we bodies that bend and twist? As we lay in Shavasana, an invitation for muscles to relax, I think of a story of a marriage. Meso-American culture bound with 5,000-year-old India, arranged by the West. Lying here in ceremonial grade cacao to open the heart, what the Aztecs drank as sacred medicine and spiritual ritual at ceremonies was not the ceremony. Modern myth displaced it. We rewrote it, entangled it to the Vedic period yoga, Ayurveda, now held in international hubs, where some walk the chill path, through Himalayan mountains to Goa via bodies that move and flow, the Rig Veda now performed in studios and wellness retreats, which has become the place for prayer, inner light and wisdom. Enjoy with some bodies dying for a cool new t-shirt that reads, I'm just here for the Shavasana. I bodies, we bodies, through bodies we distort. And yet some of us die. Lay there in corpse pose, let go of ego, surrender and be totally present, become a witness to rebirth, cleave to rebrand, mindfulness and sequin leggings made in Bangladesh. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. We call for profound universal peace. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. And may the thoughts, words and actions of my life contribute in some ways to that happiness and to that freedom for all. Let us lie again in corpse pose and pose another question of the sky and the universe. What is my place in it, within it? Breathe in this knowledge, live into this knowledge, for it molds the heart. We amazing bodies who bend, and together finally come to rest in Shavasana.
Very engaging. Okay, well, we've got our clock here says 12:07, so we've got some time for questions, comments, some affirmative critique. Yeah, it'd be great if from the floor, if anyone would like to sort of participate in the lovely presentations we've had so far.
I didn't have words after hearing Alexandra's presentation. I still don't have words, but I have my violin, but it's in the car. And all I wished for was to have it next to me and to play a lament in response to your words. Thank you for being brave.
Hello, I'm Katie. I think is a question for Jonathan, and this is for you two, I think, but perhaps more broadly for everyone. I am a writer, and I'm really fascinated by the experience of co-writing because it sits outside of my experience of writing as being a very individual experience of internal movement into the external. And I've been reading Marianne Milner recently and thinking about the difference between wide attention and narrow attention. And so my question is about attention, which is when you're co-writing, what happens to your attention in that process?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't quite know where to. Yeah, I think I don't quite know where I'm going to go with this, but I think what happens if I think about how it's different from when I'm writing on my own. When I'm writing on my own, I have a sense of writing with others, as even when I'm writing on my own. So when I'm writing with the others around me, perhaps physically around me in the space where I'm writing, and I'm writing with the Laurel Richardson book that I've just had a look at and I'm wanting to speak with. And so in a sense, when writing with Ken, that's, I mean, and when I'm writing on my own, I'm still writing with Ken. I'm often writing with Ken. Sorry? And with Pete. Of course. So I think that's where I'd go with that. I don't think I'd draw that very sharp distinction that you're making in terms of attention. The attention seems kind of both centered and dispersed all at the same time. That's, yeah. Yeah.
I would echo that. And I also think I think you used the word attention. And I think there's a sort of an affective force with the word attention because it suggests attending to. Yeah, so there is the more than is the other, which can be human or non-human, yeah, or more than simply human, yeah. And I think Jonathan's example there kind of illustrates that, I don't know, forces often impel us to act differently, i.e. write or talk or whatever. And I mean, that's certainly how it works with myself and Jonathan. I mean, I've sort of introduced the concept into my writing, or practice into my writing, and it kind of echoes around some of the presentations today. But Alexandra's there is the idea of spiriting. Yeah, that spiriting is I think less of spirit as a noun and more of spiriting as a process where it enforces certain practices, or it enforces a writing or a talking or whatever. So. So I like to think of it more in affective ways about force rather than trying to form the words. Yeah. So there's sort of, I don't want to. There's a flow between force and form, I think. Yeah, and I think so. Writing with others is forceful. That's how I would feel. Certainly I do most of my co-writing with Jonathan, but over the years with lots of other folk as well. Yeah, and it's fun too. It's a good question, thank you. Someone else like to? Yeah, keep forgetting it. There you
I just want to follow on that a little bit. I mean, I've found in my own writing that the others I write with are other parts of me. So there can be a whole writing group together, and the younger feminist self. There's this aging me. There's various parts of me. So, but I feel very inspired to kind of take this on with a friend who's a therapist, and she works with parts in her therapy, and so do I, and for the two of us to write together with each other's parts, responding to them. But Alexandra, yeah, I have no words too, but I do have words, and I think really it's thank you. And I just kind of recognize the courage it takes to share that level of vulnerability, but it is such a kindness and such an act of generosity to share that with others, because what you have done there is touched on something that is so universal. And, you know, we all deal with grief in different ways, and but also in similar ways. And putting words to it just kind of mirrors something of what is available to all of us. And so I'm really grateful for that, because in the remnants, you know, in the endings, with the remnants, we create new beginnings and new relationships. And that was so beautifully shared. So thank you so much.
Did you want to respond?
Yes, thank you, really, and I mean, I do. Thank you. Yeah, just say thank you, and I do grief counselling actually, and it's there's a certain freedom in them not knowing my grief journey, but when it's shared with me, it's so healing for me to hear it. It's that they don't know it, but they're healing me too, just by telling me their stories.
Thank you. That's a really rich conversation. Anyone else like to? This is fun. I get a bit of exercise.
Steps in.
Yeah.
So it is actually for yourselves, Ken and Jonathan. I was interested in when you said that then about writing with, that you always feel like you're writing with. Yes. Also writing towards others, aren't you? And in that sense, I was starting to think about, so what are some of the influences? How do you then craft this script, the product that then emerges, as in right now in today's session? How do you craft that?
What was that? Just press that in. Someone we talking about Norm Denson in the previous one about the epiphanies. Yeah, I think, and I also liked. I think it was the person in the previous presentation talking about rewilding scholarship. One of the things I found in collaborative writing, you know, which it can be interpreted in multiple kind of ways, is it's a facilitated process. It's processual rather than substantive. Yeah, so I was thinking about the response to Alexandra's the question you asked. You know, it's not so much about an individual presence of the other. It's a process of presencing. You know, presencing is a facilitative force. It's an energy, and I think it's being able to allow yourself to be in that place where, I think it's Virginia Woolf uses the phrase, the pen gets on the scent. Yeah, there's a point in the writing process where the pen is doing it, yeah, more than the head is doing it, you know. And I think the spirited thing that I was talking about in response to the question earlier is part of that. If Jonathan was suggesting a writing to Ken or whatever, there's someone not perched on your shoulder kind of thing. That's my first response to your question. I could probably think of more in a moment.
And part of your question was about the crafting. A question about the crafting.
Can I say, don't write with straight lines.
Right. I was thinking about how the crafting starts at the beginning, so the crafting's not something that happens after. I mean, there are some kind of necessary restrictions that happen and have to be attended to, like we've only got 8 minutes. So how are we gonna do something with the text? I mean, I suppose thinking beyond just Ken and me, but applying to all collaborative writing processes, there's a politics to it, I guess, about who gets to do what and say what, and who has, which is different for Ken and me as it would be different for you and me writing. There'd be something about the negotiation that's needed about how things get crafted. I mean, just to be practical in how we did this, we wrote for a bit, and then we realised we'd got more writing than we needed for today, and little time. So we just went through a process of Ken cutting some of his words, and then because Ken tends to write more than me at one time, I struggle to write a lot. Ken writes a lot very easily. And so Ken looked at what he'd written and cut it down, and I looked at it again. And then we just settled on it.
And I get really angry about that. Yeah, for big sight. But I mean, I think part of our process, I mean, I tend to hemorrhage words. And most of them aren't very good. But Jonathan, the art of crafting has not to be belittled. I think that's, the crafting is really, really important. And I think it's about, the significance of others, where your writing is going to go. We've got a colleague, we've said this lots and lots of times. We think about the performative act, what work does it do? We have to have an intuitive sensing of what we imagine perhaps our work is going to do. Is it going to bring a tear to the eye? Yeah. Is it going to raise an emotion because of the sound? So there's a sensing, writing forward, if you like, to that possibility is an important part of the action. So you're like John said, we're crafting it to make sure it doesn't go over 8 minutes. And that's partly instrumental, but it's important. Because we've had people who write their stuff and they're journeying on. It's, well, my 17th point is, so it's part of that. That's and I think it's something that you work with as well. So I thought someone was waving for another question. Or sometimes I was talking to someone who's in the room at the moment, and she was saying she submitted the paper. I said, what did the reviewers say? Well, they only looked at the formatting. That's that happens sometimes as well. Yeah. Yes.
So yeah, thank you all. Amazing presentation. So this question, Simone, is for you. Yes. So I'm thinking I liked the way you were bringing in the ways in which your parents form relationships, and in a sense, what I picked up from that is that there is for better or worse in the terms of the circumstances, but there's a kind of reciprocity. So something is given and something else is formed in that. And I was wondering whether you saw that as continuing in your own life in terms of the connections that you make, this kind of reciprocal relationship. In what ways, if you could kind of expand the metaphor a little bit of the way that your parents make connections to your own life and perhaps to experience reciprocity. So.
Do you mean the reciprocity to my parents or more in general? Yes, yes. Usually I would say, as I find someone to work with, as you guys, then I thought instantly, there is a pattern of making connections, and coming back now, today, to the conference and meeting all the people who had done the Berlin and the paper stuff together with me, it is totally different in terms of my feelings approaching the people, and usually I'm always on the side, what can I do for the people? It starts with my PhD students and other colleagues or advanced students, and that is something that I would like to mention and to do because it is in some kind, it makes me happy to work with other people. And of course, I took the title of the program of our year's conference serious, and I thought I have to do something with connections. And then I found that in different phases of my life, even to be not happy with that reaction of the young lady from the cloakroom, I thought, okay, then I have to give my paper very good at that lecture theater 21 because it was about surviving in a tired society, whereas the Western German colleagues described that part of Germany as a tragic society. Could be, but the Western part would be described as an ironic society. And sometimes I would say, oh, the other way around. I found that so inspiring to have that discussion and that work earlier and now being back here. It is always, as you said, an ongoing process to work with the goals, the ideas, and the comments of other people, and that makes that place so special, and that makes this conference different from all other conferences I ever attend to. It's a little bit.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So read it in the chat.
Yes.
I don't think it's that. Listening to speakers, I'm wondering whether there is an unacknowledged posture or force at play. How do we scaffold our bodies to choose to free our bodies? Do you have preferred environments when writing the way you enjoy, the way you focus?
Any of the presenters like to take that one? Here, or Jonathan.
What about Rubina? Where's Rubina? Yeah. Take it. Yeah, take it.
The beige.
Yeah, so is there something about freedom or something in the posture? I'm a psychologist, I'm a person, I practice yoga, I'm religious, all sorts of things. I think I think we might always be kind of looking for freedom when it's not always the thing that maybe most warranted or most needed. So the thing about yoga, there's lots of themes that I was trying to tap into, which I know would not have come across an 8-minute presentation, but I'm talking about decoloniality, and it's so complicated. And what we normally do is pay kind of lip service to things, don't we? So we'll be like, okay, so do a cultural capabilities thing, but then we've completely missed the point. And I think that's what sometimes happens when we think about yoga. We're like, do that as a self-care practice, but the true listening, the true speaking to your body, asking questions is very uncomfortable. So I don't know anyone who's been incredibly conscious that's been okay with geopolitical things that are happening in the last few years, and that's tied in with my university studies. I have not been okay these past kind of years, and I think when I listen to myself, I lean into, I'm not actually looking for freedom. That might come in different forms, but maybe in ways that might surprise others. Does that make sense?
Sure.
It's there, the question. Do I need to do anything with this or just hold it? Just hold it. Okay. Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation. I thought it was, well, everybody's presentation I thought was amazing. Yeah, I was just saying thank you to everybody for their presentations. But yeah, I really valued, I think, the silk, bringing that in. You said about kind of healing the wound with collective hands, and your poem and the imagery, and it was just beautiful. So thank you. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about within your research there are elements that you can speak about, and I'm not asking you to speak about them, but I suppose I'm wondering what that process has been like for you. I'm a trainee counselling psychologist. I'm also thinking about the lens of decoloniality and thinking about how that experience of I suppose kind of what it is that you're kind of able to speak to, and what you're not, and that you're holding, and what
that process like for you? How does that come out through your work? And yeah. I think this has been mentioned a little bit before. I think, Jonathan, you mentioned it. I think psychology is a thing that people think is apolitical. We're encouraged to do it. So I study in the NHS as an NHS kind of funded place. And there's this kind of thing that we're not political. And unlike babes, everything's political. And we don't talk about that stuff enough. So one of the strands that I'm talking about as a Muslim is Islamophobia. Try researching that as a Muslim. Like there's so much. And it might not be overt. So do you know this stuff around capabilities kind of training, sensitivity training? It's all the like overt stuff that just shouldn't be happening anyway. I mean, the World Cup comes to mind. Do you know that there's a gradient of things that are happening? If I come into a space and people hold all these perceptions about me, then some of it's not named, some of it's not voiced, but I can't change my appearance. So like my race is not kind of changeable. I don't wear a headscarf. I learnt very young not to, but because my Muslim identity isn't afforded to me. And I've had to do the work to recognize it, understand that, and try and reconsolidate it. But also I'm of an era in my life that I think I'm just like, I don't care anymore as much. And I can do it potentially through my writing, through research. So in psychology as well, we're really encouraged, I think, to just get your thesis out there, just qualify, just do it. We're encouraged by our lecturers, everyone. If you do it slowly, there's something wrong with you, like you haven't cheated the system, you haven't done it properly. I find that incredibly abhorrent. Like we're meeting people at potentially the most vulnerable times of their life. I do not want to start my career, even though I've been doing psychology since 2012, but I don't want to start my being a clinical psychologist. Like I just won't do that. But it has its kind of cost. So I sit probably with embarrassment every day that I have not qualified the same time as my peers. But I've done an autoethnography and it's hard. I don't think I need to say that in this room. But I've done it because it's the only methodology that kind of made sense to me. But even then, autoethnography doesn't hold all the answers. Do you know, like I'm talking about decolonization. We talk about decolonization a lot, and I don't think the papers that I often read are representative of what I think what that means. And also decolonization is different to decoloniality, and it's so it's so messy. And I'm okay with that because as a therapist and a person, I deal with the messy. I'm amongst it because I'm working with people and we're very complex. And I guess what I was talking about in yoga, like we can dissociate. Dissociation is not a bad thing in itself. Like it is understanding it. We can be hyper observant. Again, that's not bad in itself, but it's the way in which we contextualize it and understand it. And what our theories do, I think, is they simplify. I think you use a lovely expression, like, but there's no, I don't think there's existence in the simplicity. Like it's so constraining, dangerous, whatever.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we're up to closing time. It's 12:30 now. Thanks to all the presenters. Thanks for everyone asking wonderful questions and making rich points. So congratulations to everyone. Thank you very much.